Hello, everyone. Um, Today, we're going to discuss again the era of institutional and lifestyle development of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, beginning in 1863, wherein the formal organization took place, to 1888. So far in our study, we have seen that the development of Adventist was progressive, with each stage building upon the previous ones. Thus, the Millerite movement laid a prophetic base during the period up through October 1844. So, between 1844 and 1848, the founder of the Seventh-day Adventism erected or established the distinctive doctrinal framework on the prophetic platform established by Miller. When they had completed the task, the Sabbatarians were ready to organize to preserve their beliefs and the heritage better and to facilitate the outreach to others. So running parallel to these basic stages, we are now involving concept of mission. So from the time of Miller, emphasizes on the importance of the prophetic interpretation. And after Millwright, after the great disappointment, people started to keep the Sabbath as one of the distinctive doctrine of the um, post Millwright movement. And after that, um, the Millerite or the remnant of the Millerite movement, continue to build up and making up their uh, specific doctrinal beliefs. And they are also trying to reach those who were ex-Millerites. And now they are going to after that they have that going out for mission. So the year 1863 witnessed a major shift as Adventists began to focus on the type of life they should live and to develop institutions to support that lifestyle. So there are seven significant um, lifestyle and being institutionalized from 1863 to 1888. And one of the things that they established at that period is the Healthful Living and the Western Health Reform Institute. The struggle for church organization came to its maturity on May 21, 1863. That was the first organization took place in the General Conference when they have the General Conference was established. Okay, take note. It's May 21, 1863, the first establishment of General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventists, the formal worldwide organization structure of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, the time had arrived for the next step in the formation of Adventism. The first major move in that direction was the Healthful Living. So after they established the organization, then they see to it that they have that unique lifestyle. So a mere 15 days after the achievement of the functional organization on June 15, 1863, Ellen White received her first comprehensive health reform vision because at the time they focused so much on the Bible, but they did not give uh, equal importance on the health message of the health reform. So, as what I've said, June 5, 1863, Ellen White received this comprehensive health reform. She said, I saw, she wrote, that it was sacred duty to attend to our health and arouse others to their duty. So we have duty to speak, to come out against the intemperance of every kind. Intemperance in working, eating, in drinking, and drugging, and then point them to God's great medicine, water, pure, soft water, for disease, for health, for cleanliness, and for luxury. I saw that we should not be silent upon the subject of health, but should wake up minds to the subject. The work of God requires of us, she noted, will not shut us away from caring for our health. So the more perfect our health, the more perfect will be our labor. So at the time, June 5, 1863, Ellen White emphasizes the importance of taking care of the body. That is a health reform. So the 1863 vision, however, was not the first steering of health reform among the early Sabbatarian Adventists. The much esteemed, the sea captain Joseph Bates, for example, had been all-around health reformer for many years. And during early 1820s, while still a sea captain, he had given up strong drink when he realized that he looked forward to this daily glass with more enthusiasm than he did to his food. So while at sea, Joseph Bates, he was so excited to drink a glass of wine, comparing to excitement that he had in eating food. But he realized that, you know, wine is not good for the body. So a year later, he abandoned wine. Then after his baptism in 1823, he left his job and started to, proclaim, joined with the Millerite, preaching the gospel. He helped organize one of the first temperance society in the United States. So Joseph Bates, however, did not regard health reform of equal importance to such issue as the seventh day Sabbath. So Christ's heavenly ministry on the third angel's messages, it was important but not present truth. At the time, they give emphasis on the Sabbath, but um, they did not include the present truth about the health reform. So therefore, he remained largely silent on the topic until 1863, when Ellen White received the vision of the equal importance and to be part of the distinctive doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist Church about the health reform. Some slight stirring appeared among the Sabbatarian Adventists on the topic of healthful living in the late 1840s and during the late 50s. Uh, in 1840, for example, Mrs. White spoke of harmful effects of tobacco, tea, and coffee, and in 1850s, the church took some action against strong usage of tobacco or the use of tobacco. So we can find here that it's a progressive, it's not an abrupt uh, application of the health reform, because the revelation given to them was also progressive. So we can find that in early 50s, they gave emphasis that tobacco is not good for health, because at the time, um, it was a common belief that tobacco is used for medicinal purposes. But Ellen White made mention that it is harmful and toxic to the body. So one of the most interesting example of the developing quality of present truth among the early Adventists is the topic of unclean foods. Now, in November 1850, James White argued extensively on the basis of Acts 10 and other texts that pork was permissible food in the gospel presentation. Though there was that, um, a message started to emphasize on the health reform about the tea, tobacco, but many of the Adventists they continue to eat pork, and when when their attention was called that pork is forbidden, at the time there was that dissenting opinion about the topic, and so it was really a struggle in the part of of the Millerites or the Adventists movement at the time, because they are not um, in harmony, or they are not united on that specific um, health reform message that they received. And so when that matter was brought to them, one of the person who opposes that was James White, who is the wife of Ellen White, that was in November 1850. And so also Ellen White is still continuing eating pork at the time, even though they are already um, Sabbatarian. So because of this, um, they have that, dissenting opinion. And one of the proponent that um, pork is not good for health was S.N. Haskell. Okay, is the one actually um, bringing up that issue to the Sabbatarian. And as what I've said, James White argued that on the basis of Acts chapter 10 and other texts that pork was permissible because according to him, according to Acts 10, as quoted by James White, that there is no distinction because when Peter had that vision, that a blanket was lowered and he was told in a vision, Peter was told by the vision to eat uh, those unclean animals, and he said, "No, from the beginning, Lord, since my childhood, I never eat this." And we know the rest of the story, that unclean animals is actually not a literal animal, but it refers to the the believers outside, people outside the Jewish community, because Jewish people, they believe that salvation is exclusive only for them, and though if you are not a member of the Israel, you don't have the privilege of eternal life or salvation. But his mind was, Peter at the time was um, educated by God that what God is already um, those people, the Jewish people, or no, the what's this? The Gentiles are also covered by my blood when I died on the cross, and so therefore you will not consider them as unclean because they are also part of my sacrifices at the cross. So he reprimanded the article in review in 1854. James White. Um, he reprimanded Haskell not to propagate or preventing the Sabbatarian to eat pork. Apparently, some zealous Adventists keep raising the issue, and finally, in 1858, Ellen White rebuked Eisen Haskell for agitating the question. Her argument is quite interesting. First, she noted that if he kept his ideas on swine flesh to himself, they would know they would do no harm. But because he was not quiet on the topic, he was causing disruption in the church. So Ellen White accused Haskell that you are, instigating trouble in the admin or among the Sabbatarians because you are telling us not to eat pork. And so she said, if it is the duty of the church to abstain from swine flesh, she continued, God will discover it to me more than two or three. He will reach this church in their duty. So we can see that Ellen White was also resistant when it comes to eating swine flesh or pork at the time. So, but later on, it was, revealed to him that revealed to her that pork is not good for health, based on Leviticus chapter 11. So God is leading out a people, not a few separate individual here and there, one believing these things, another that. That is a remarkable statement in the light of the fact that God works with groups, not just individual. God is patient in his leadership, and present truth is dynamic and progressive. So even though Ellen White, James White, they were founders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but in some point of time, they don't have all the revelation. Okay, they don't have the revelation. Some were given to others, and as they build up, the distinctive doctrine, they were able to confirm later on that what others are saying is actually true according to the Bible. So, thus it was with health reform. Once doctrinal and organizational steps were in place, lifestyle issue, including health reform, became the next step in the development of Adventism and present truth. Truth, is progressive, and God leads his people step by step. Thus, a major turning point in the Adventist history took place in 1863 when that, as I said, when the formal uh, organization took place. At this juncture, we should note that Seventh-day Adventists were not alone in most of their health reform ideas and practices. To the contrary, they were part of the large contemporary health reform movement in the United States. It sought to correct destructive living habits and gross ignorance on how to live and care for the body. Because at the time, an average person during the time of the Millerites can consume 1 gallon of alcohol. Uh, so the lifespan at the time was very short because of their lifestyle. And so to preserve the health of God's people, so God gave them the health reform message. So many of its points we today regard as a common knowledge, ideas such as frequent bathing, because people at the time, they seldom took bath. Mm. Germs as a cause of disease, harmful effects of tobacco, the danger of certain types of drugs, and importance of balanced diet. So one of those individuals that actually uh, pioneered of the Adventist health reform was Sylvester Graham in the late 1830s. So Ellen White in June 5, 1863, vision placed an Adventist health reform movement. Unfortunately, it was easier to read about health reform, but it was, hard to live it. As a result, an overworked and intemperance general president by the name of James White suffered from paralytic stroke on August 16, 1865. So, as we can see here, health reform does not only cover what kind of food to eat and not to eat, but it's also cover about temperance. Because at the time, James White, he was so workaholic, and because of his being workaholic, he suffered from paralytic stroke and on August 16, 1865. So with that, they have the message, but they did not live according to the message. So they reap the consequence of their being intemperate with regards to doing the Lord's work. It has been said that if we cannot finish the work will finish us. So his wife decided, because of his physical condition, he was brought by Ellen White to Dr. Jackson Institute in Dansville, and they were accompanied, James White and Ellen White were accompanied by two ailing leaders of the Sabbatarian or the Seventh-day Adventist Church leaders, known as John Evans Lockborough, G.N. Lockborough, and Uriah Smith. Um, so you can see that those important leaders in our church also suffered health issues because of their intemperance. And Joseph Bates, as a health reformer, is still in good shape at the age of 73 because he was so particular in health reform. So if Adventism came near to collapsing in 1856 because of lack of organization and inability to pay its minister, in 1865 it teetered on the brink of disaster from poor health habits of its leading ministers. So here's a contrast. Um, in 1856, the church or the movement, the early Sabbatarian, uh, who were the remnant of the Millerite, they were about to this tangle, this to be in this. They are experiencing almost uh, disintegrating as the body of Christ because of the reason of lack of organization, and because there is no structure of organization, they could not centralize, or they cannot pay its ministers of their needs, and so they were almost the organization, or yeah, the movement will almost to collapse. But you know, uh, James White made a proposal that it is not unbiblical to have that organization. And so in 1863, there was that formal organization. However, another tests that almost, um, made the Sabbatarian of the Seventh-day Adventist Church to collapse in its structure is the result of poor health practices of the leading ministers. So the next step in Adventism, developing relationship with health reform, resulted from Ellen White vision on December 25, 1865. Her vision called for Adventists to establish their own health reform institution. Health reform was integrated into Adventist theology this time. And so she said that it's very important for us to have our own health reform institution. And from 1865 onward, health reform and health care become growing aspect of the Adventist ministry to the church and to the world. And we know that those health institutions they called before as sanitariums, and that's why we have this Bacolod Sanitarium and Hospital before, and now it's called um, Adventist Medical Center Bacolod because um, this is one this message was given by Ellen White that each that the church should have its sanitarium as the leading health reformist all over the world. So the health reformer, there was a publication of 16-page a monthly journal that began in 1866 um, that covers that produce that monthly journal that talks about health reform. Okay, so in the year 1876 witnessed the appointment of 24-year-old John Dr. Harvey Kellogg as a chief administrator of the Western Health Reform Institute because they organized that Western Health Institute in Battle Creek, Michigan, and the first administrator was Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. Okay, within a few months, Kellogg had changed the institution and named it to Battle Creek Sanitarium. The word sanitarium, he proclaimed, meant a place where people learn to stay well. So by 1890s, under Kellogg's guidance, the Battle Creek Sanitarium became the largest institution of its kind in the world and achieved worldwide renown. And achieved the world. It was, um, in 1880s, it became popular all over the world. So another issue that brought the development of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in its lifestyle is on the issue of struggle for non-combatancy, because in the early 19th century, or in the 20th century, early part of the 18th century, there was that war. A second lifestyle issue confronting the new organized denomination concerned military service. America's bloodiest war began in 1861 and raged for 4 years. There was that war for 4 years. Two questions presented themselves: should Adventist men serve in military? If the answer to that question was yes, then should we bear arms and kill other human beings? So that was the issue raised by James White um, on August 12, 1862, that was published in the Review and Herald. So people, or the Seventh-day Adventist Church members at the time, were um, divided on that issue. So James White viewed war as out of harmony of the Ten Commandments. And the fourth precept of the law says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And the sixth commandment says, thou shalt not kill. So after carefully laying out the case, White made an extremely controversial suggestion. In the case of drafting, he said, the government assumed responsibility of the violation of the law of God and it would be madness to resist. So that was his his um, suggestion, that if the member of the church will be part of government's military, and he will bring, um, arms or gun, and can kill. Actually, he's not killing, but the offense or the violation will be charged to to the government, as if that the person who killed his enemy is not accountable to God. And he said, he who would resist until in the administration of the military law, he was shut down, goes too far, we think, taking the responsibility of society. So if you will not, then uh, if you are shut down by the enemy, then it's a form of suicide. So that's why it's okay for him. So the most radical of the views was that Joseph Clark, who wanted to see treason of the South receive its just deserts. By the end of the war, the Seventh-day Adventist Church and United States government had reached satisfactory solution for the members of the young denomination. For its part, the government developed provision of the drafted conscientious believers to the hospital and other work, and provided opportunity for them to serve the nation without killing. So one of the significant individual actually who turned the event in favor of the church was Desmond Doss. If you happen to watch Hacksaw Ridge, it's actually a story of Desmond Doss, who is an Adventist young man, knowledgeable on not tying, that he refused to carry arms. But during the war, he was able to um, save more than 50 individuals, his fellow soldiers, by saving them without killing uh, others. So he become a medical soldier at the time. So because of this uh, conscientious objection, okay, or become conscientious objectors. He was mocked by his um, fellow soldiers because when he was given arm, he did not carry the gun, but he carried his Bible. So uh, for you to be able to understand what I'm saying about Desmond Doss, you can watch this Hacksaw Ridge a movie where it is portrayed how Desmond Doss were able to save his fellow soldiers. So that was the first development, lifestyle development was the helpful living. Second is the issue on struggle for non-combatancy. And the third issue is in search of proper education. So the third lifestyle institutional development happened between 1863 and 1888, centered on Christian education. The education emphasis came later than other development because religious groups focusing on the nearness of the end of the world have generally not felt much need for educating their children. So they were focused about the second coming of Christ. And in fact, many Adventists still believe on this. Because when I was in high school, one of the church members said, "Why you are going to college when in fact Jesus Christ will be coming soon? Why you are planting coconut? You cannot benefit the harvest because Christ will come." But fortunately, my coconut that I planted is now bearing fruits, and if I did not go to school, probably I'm not here at CPAC this time. So after all, the logic runs, why send children to school if the world is soon to end and they will never grow up to use their hard-earned learning? That attitude was widespread among Adventists even today, especially in this pandemic. Okay, White replied that the fact that Christ is very soon coming is no reason why the mind should not be improved. So if we have the ability and we have the time to expand our influence through our education, why continue educating yourselves? Because if you keep on educating yourself, if you keep on learning, you will live longer based on research. So a well-disciplined and informed mind can best receive and cherish the sublime truth of the second advent. His reply was part of the rationale in the development of Adventist system of education. By the mid-1850s, the problem of schooling had begun troubling some Adventists to the extent that they decided to try their hand at independent Christian schools. The first such endeavors took place at Buck Bridge, New York in 1853. The second was in Battle Creek, Michigan in 1856. So they formed the Millerites, or the early Adventists, the Sabbatarian. Um, they started to establish their own Christian schools. In 1861, when James White faced pressure to establish another school in Battle Creek, he wrote, "We have a thorough trial of a school at Battle Creek until most favorable circumstances, and have given up as it failed to meet the expectation of those interested." So the establishment of the church school by the Sabbatarian did not flourish because of um, incapability of the teachers to run, and they were, unexperienced teachers. So by 1867, the Battle Creek Adventists were given ready to establish a school, this time under the leadership of Goodloe Harper Bell, an experienced public school teacher. The school existed sporadically until 1870 or 1871. In 1872, the denomination began to consider more seriously the need for quality school, not so much on elementary children as for older students who required an education to spread the Advent message. So the shift now is not focused on the elementary students, but the focus now is to establish training school for young people in order to be trained, in order for them to receive training, in order to be part of spreading the gospel to the world. So the church leadership decided to inaugurate a school at Battle Creek under the financial sponsorship of the General Conference. So the Battle Creek School, the first one to have denominational support, opened in June um, 1872 with Bell teaching 12 students. And in 1874, that small beginning became Battle Creek College with Sidney Brown Herber as principal. Battle Creek College was an important institution in the Adventist education history, not only because of its pioneering status, but because it received a great deal of attention in terms of what Adventist schools should accomplish. So, um, Battle Creek College is become the model of Adventist education, and I think Battle Creek College is now the Andrews University. So the General Conference President George I. Butler and the school committee stressed that the purpose of the school was to teach the Bible. So it is a Bible-based education. The emphasis was to be on both Adventist doctrinal, prophetic perspective, and those skills necessary to do evangelism at all kinds. So Ellen White penned an important article entitled "Proper Education to Help Guide the Planning of the New School." If the school would highlight the Bible, she emphasized that it should aim at developing student balanced mental, physical, and spiritual power. So the emphasis of Adventist education, when they have that established that education is actually the holistic development of the being. I'm referring to mental, physical, spiritual, and social aspect of the people that should be developed in order to restore the lost image of God in man. That is, the philosophy of Adventist Christian education. It is holistic in nature. It is developing all aspect of the being. So by the summer of 1882, the college governing board decided to close the school indefinitely. Thus, the denomination first official attempt as formal education collapsed. The reason for the collapse of this school because it did not come up to the expectation, because the purpose was actually to have a Bible-based school, but the curriculum was adapted by the pioneers on the curriculum was patterned to the existing curriculum of the government in order for the students to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree, of which um, the curriculum was more on Latin and Greek, and there was no manual labor, no required class and health reform programs integrated on that curriculum, and they call it as a philosophical betrayal. And so in 1882, the board decided to close that school because it did not come up to the expectation of the church. So Battle Creek College reopened in the autumn of 1883 with renewed determination to implement Christian principles of education. The spring of 1882 witnessed the establishment of two church-sponsored secondary schools, Headburge Academy in California and Southland Lancaster Academy in Massachusetts. Headburge Academy became the Headburge College the following year and is known as today as Pacific Union College, or university as this time, and South Lancaster Academy eventually grew into Atlantic Union College. So Brown, Berger, and Dale, the leading educators at the Battle Creek College during the 1870s, each established one of the schools. They made reform as part of the curriculum. However, elementary school did not begin until then. So we can see the Adventist educators who were pioneers. They were Brown, Berger, and Bell, that they established, Headburge Academy and another one, South Lancaster Academy. The fourth, lifestyle development aside from health reform, non-combatancy, education. The fourth is advances in financial stewardship, how it develops. It did not take too long for the denomination to discover the weakness of systematic benevolence. Systematic benevolence, they call it a nickname as Sister Betsy. It was inadequate and cumbersome and lacked a firm biblical base, so it was not adopted because there was no, they promoted that systematic giving or benevolence, but they lacked, a firm biblical foundation of that systematic benevolence. So gradually during the 1860s and 1870s, the denomination evolved a better grasp of truth tithing. Conwright shared his argument at a General Conference session that November, establishing that if all Adventists paid a faithful tithe, the General Conference treasurer would receive $150,000 annually instead of $40,000. As a result of his presentation, the session resolved that it was the duty of all members, it is required to all members under ordinary circumstances to devote 1/10 of all their income from whatever source to the cause of God. So they now emphasizing the importance of tithing. The 10% of the income should be set aside for the Lord's work as mandated in Malachi 3:10. So that was the biblical foundation. From the point forward, the Seventh-day Adventists increasingly practice biblical tithing. Because when you return tithe, you are recognizing that God is the owner of everything. So that was another development. Another development of the Adventism is Ellen White's role in the development of Adventist lifestyle. So what is the role of Ellen White? We pointed out in chapter 2 that Ellen White did not take a leading role in the development of Adventist doctrine during the 1840s. No, she did not do it. Rather, the procedure was one of the Bible study until consensus developed. So the formulation of the distinctive doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is not more about one person, but it's a product of the Bible conferences and corporate Bible study. At that point, Ellen White sometimes received a vision that reaffirmed the consensus and helped those who still had questions to accept the correctness of the biblical derived conclusion of the group. Her role in the doctrine formulation is on confirmation rather than initiation. So take note of that. That Ellen White, he just reaffirm or confirm what was the result of Bible conferences. And we still continue to have these Bible conferences. If there are issues, doctrinal issues, we do it in um, uh, biblical, or we have that, biblical conferences, and there settle the issue. So the basic step in the formation of Adventist beliefs was the result of intensive Bible study and held conferences to bring about consensus. Lifestyle development followed somewhat different patterns. So we can see um, the pattern here, that the formulation of the Seventh-day Adventist Church was done through intensive Bible study. Remember that the second coming of Christ, before it was declared to the world by William Miller, it took him 7 years to have that intensive study. And when he presented it to the people, they have to question. And so ultimately, when they were convinced, then, it became an established doctrine. And so with this development pattern from William Miller, the early Sabbatarian or Seventh-day Adventists make that held several Bible conferences in order to study a specific issue and come out to a unified biblical understanding of the specific issue. So again, the role of Ellen White in the development of the lifestyle is something to do with reaffirmation or confirmation of the result of the Bible conferences that made by the church leaders. So take note of that. So perhaps the difference revolves around the fact that doctrines define denomination. Doctrine among the early Sabbatarians Adventists therefore was a crucial issue and received a great deal of attention. Lifestyle items, on the other hand, tend to second order concern for denomination. So many lifestyle issues are not so much basic determinants of denomination identity as they are ways of life and facilitates mission spreading in its doctrinal messages. So from this perspective, health reform enables people to become better missionaries and enable healthy and healed people to come to the place where they can better understand the gospel. So it was given equal importance. The health reform was given equal importance because if you are not physically healthy, then it's difficult for an individual to receive also, to understand also the message. So similarly, Christian education facilitates the development of both individual church members and the gospel preacher. While the minds of the founders of Adventism may not have consciously followed such reasoning, the movement early leaders seem to have acted upon it. So the latter course was evident in health reform, while former predominated in such areas as military service and tithing, because Ellen White often applied biblical principles to the everyday life, the church, and its individual believers. Over the year, her counsel has come increasingly to center of any discussion about Adventist lifestyle. So in summary, we find that development of early Adventists a dual role of Ellen White, with less activity in the realm of doctrinal formation and more in lifestyle development. So Ellen White, his ministry is for the guidance of the church, especially on the health reform. Now, another development, lifestyle development of the church is in the area of mission. So we need to we know in chapter 2 and 3 that early Seventh Day Adventists were anything but enthusiastic missionaries. They are known as movement. Seventh Day Adventist Church were known as movement because if the church will not do the mission, we exist. We will not continue to exist as a church. That's why we call it um, a movement because we have mission to do. And that although the local point of their preaching was three messages of Revelation 14 with its obvious imperative for worldwide mission, early Adventists gave up the shut door only because the presence of new converts forced them to do so. And even after that, they continued to minimize their mission responsibility. Take note that the shut door, they believe that if you are not belong or if not believe to the second coming of Christ in 1844, you not believe on it, then you don't have that salvation. But they started to open the remnant of the Millerite movement, or known as Seventh Day Adventist Church members. They started to open and trying to do away with the shut door theology, and they started to recognize that you know church or anyone is entitled for salvation as long as they believe on Jesus Christ. And so, on many occasions, James White stood at the forefront of those who envisioned a larger work for the denomination. A month before organization of the General Conference in 1865, White claimed in the view that ours is a worldwide witnessing. So they are a focus towards outside of America. So a few months earlier, he had pointed out the need of sending missionary to Europe. Then in June 1863, the review reported that General Conference Executive Committee may send B.F. Snook, a missionary to Europe before the close of 1863. While the newly established General Conference did not have enough staff to permit them to dispatch Snook overseas, it did have a minister who was more than eager for the assignment. In frustration, the creative pool requested and received missionaries sponsored by the Advent Christian denomination, the main body of Sunday keeping Adventists. So because Adventists could not afford to send, missionary outside America, what they did, is they allowed Adventist Christian denomination, who is a Sunday keeper, to help the need of Snook. Okay, after arriving in Europe in 1864, in Szuchowski preached the Seventh-day Adventist message despite his Advent Christian sponsorship. He promoted his work through public evangelism, publishing a periodical, and preparation and circulation of tracts. The effect but erratic preacher planted Seventh-day Adventist doctrinal seeds in Switzerland, Italy, Hungary, Romania, and other parts of Europe, seeds that eventually bore fruit. Meanwhile, the Seventh-day Adventist, still reluctant to send missionary at his best, took the adventurous step in 1868 to sending John N. Loughborough and O.T. Bordeaux to far-off California. From that providential beginning, the work grew rapidly in California and surrounding states. It is of some interest to note that California set the pattern for Adventist mission around the world. So after establishing the small publication base, the Adventists established a publishing house, we call it a Pacific Press, and a periodical Science of the Times in 1874, a sanitarium at St. Helena in 1878, an academic college in Hillsborough in 1882. Meanwhile, the year after the initiation of California Mission, Szuchowski converts made a move that forced Hittan Adventist Church to expand its missiological understanding and practices. He arrived too late for decision, but he remained in the United States for more than a year to become better grounded in Adventist belief. Then he returned to Europe in 1870 as an ordained Seventh-day Adventist minister. One fruit of the contact with European Adventists was development of Missionary Society at 1863 and during the General Conference in session. Another development, number 7, is other important development between 1863 and 1888. Before moving away from 1863 to 1888 era, we should briefly look at the 3 other events. The first beginning the Adventist effort among white population in the American South. In late 1870s saw the start of regular Adventist work in Virginia, Texas, and other southern states. But for several reasons, including regional animosities and other possible war difficulties, Adventists failed to find ready reception of rapid growth that it had been in the far west. So even though they have, preaching the gospel, but there is that racial discrimination between the blacks and the white during also that time. The second Adventist milestone in 1863 to 1888 was the era of passing of 2 denomination founders. So at the time, March 19, 1872, Joseph Bates died in the Western Health Reform Institute. Joseph Bates died in the Western Health Reform Institute in Battle Creek shortly before its 80th birthday. The old reformer had kept strong program going until near end. On August 6, 1881, James White passed away at the age of 60. It's also in the Battle Creek Sanitarium. The Seventh-day Adventist Church would never have existed without his forceful leadership. And the final point that we should note in the pre-1888 period was the growing agitation for a national Sunday law and the passage of many states about Sunday laws. During the mid-1880s, as the local authorities arrested Adventists in such states as California, Arkansas, for the crime of working on Sunday. This crisis led to the development and regular publication of American Centennial of Religious Liberty to combat the injustices. So far, this is just for today. Thank you very much.